Today I'm going to take you on a path less travelled by first-time tokenisation projects, and I hope to demonstrate these projects don't really need to be so ugly. I'll be sharing an analogy of how we have seen many organisations approach their compliance project. Then we'll look at how this translates to actual projects and lessons learned. From here we'll look at some future-proofing tips that will minimise your project risk and budget variance, and finally we'll look at some key takeaway questions that can help you to engineer a successful project. So imagine you're from outer space and you've landed on this beach and you need to go travelling. Imagine you've just come up with the idea of a contraption that can be ridden and has two wheels, and you'll call it a bicycle. As you're designing your bicycle, you decide it should have some nice wide tyres for the sand. You don't need brakes or gears because it won't run away, and a big wide seat will be very comfy. So you come up with this cruising bike. Once you've got to the end of the beach, you come across some new terrain. Unfortunately, the beach-going bike without any brakes is no longer suitable. So you push that aside and with hindsight build a bike that is also appropriate for the next leg of your journey. This is often the approach we see deployed for tokenisation projects because it's the first time. We don't have hindsight and we struggle to predict the issues that lay ahead. So as humans, we naturally focus on designing a point solution for what we can see as the immediate problem in front of us. Unfortunately, this approach is setting the project up for failure from the outset because it will result in rework, higher costs, and increased lead times than if we got it right the first time. These issues are compounded because PCI projects are compliance-based, which means there is a tight budget because it's not revenue generating, and the deadline is not easily moved because the risks or penalties for non-compliance are high. So accurately managing budget and project deliverables is a must for a successful outcome. Moving on to lessons learned from many tokenisation implementations, how can we avoid the analogy playing out in our projects? We often hear an oversimplification of the project with statements like, we just need tokenisation and an iframe. However, as the project progresses and more details become available, we see the same three issues emerge. The good news is, these three items can all be avoided with some good upfront planning and decision making. A significant driver of scope creep can be avoided by asking one particular question up front and documenting the agreed direction in your project charter. Is the primary focus of the project to only become PCI compliant, or do we wish to take the opportunity to improve and enhance current processes? It is essential to have this agreed up front because I can guarantee there will be plenty of tempting opportunities to improve legacy payment processes. There is no right or wrong answer to this question. It is simply an upfront business decision that will serve as a guiding project principle. We've seen many examples of organisations implementing such tempting yet unplanned process improvements during PCI projects, and whilst these improvements have resulted in significant long-term cost savings, the compliance project itself has suffered delays and incurred additional costs. The second avoidable pitfall we often see is underestimating the size of the compliance project. This relates to understanding the true size of the cardholder data footprint in your organisation up front. Time and again, we have seen amazing discoveries of cardholder data halfway through a project that needs to be secured to achieve compliance. As an example, we've seen an insurance company that sells credit card protection insurance via partners. The partners will use the full credit card number as a customer reference number, which is passed en masse to the insurance company to report completed sales. All of a sudden, there is a whole new process in scope. In the initial review, this process was not identified as in scope because the data was listed as a customer reference number and not full PAN data. The third avoidable pitfall is having tunnel vision on 90% of the credit card processes. We've seen a number of examples where organisations have implemented a solution that addresses 90% of the processes, such as securing stored card data, securing call centre payments, and securing web-based payments. But the last 10% of the processes were an afterthought. We saw one project almost come completely unstuck when it suddenly became evident that for a particular high-value product being sold, there was a mandatory requirement to perform a real-time fraud check before releasing the product. So under the standard process, the customer would select their goods, enter the credit card, and the payment form is submitted. The credit card is then tokenized and processed to the bank. The token is returned to the merchant for storage, and the customer receives the goods. But under the enhanced anti-fraud process with the high-value product, the customer selects their goods, enters the credit card, the payment form is submitted, the credit card is tokenized only and returned to the merchant. The merchant then performs the real-time fraud check on the payment history against that token, and then the token is submitted back for detokenization and payment, and then the customer receives their goods. Whilst the last 10% represents a small volume of cards or processes, they can represent significant challenges to bring 100% compliance, which is what is required. The key takeaway here is to ensure every processing detail is addressed by the intended solution. So we've covered what can be avoided with good upfront planning, but is this just the tip of the iceberg? What about the unforeseen that can't necessarily be planned for? In this section I'll highlight the 3 key reasons for unforeseen requirements, and in the next section we'll discuss how we can set ourselves up to best deal with these challenges. Future business requirements can be a challenge. As a very real example, the first wave of tokenization projects implemented just a few years ago are now being tested on this very issue. At the time of implementation, they never even considered this thing called mobile payments, and now many are looking at how this new payment channel can be rolled into their compliance solution. For them, will it be a small incremental change, or is it a whole new point solution required? The acquisition of a new business might be exciting from a growth perspective, but it can represent a nightmare for maintaining PCI compliance. How will the tokenization solution cope with new applications that run on different technology and require different integration interfaces, file formats, or token algorithms? The PCI standards are not static, and as they evolve they bring new challenges to maintaining compliance. Up until the most recent version, the predominant changes were new requirements such as the introduction of application firewalls, mandatory penetration testing, internal network scans, etc. The latest and most significant changes relate to the actual auditing standards themselves, in an effort to bring greater consistency across QSAs. IP Payments was one of the first organisations to be audited under the new standards, and it actually doubled the length of the audit. As a result, we have now updated our compliance platform to improve the collection of evidences throughout the year and try to return our audit costs to normal. So it's important to recognise the standards and auditing processes are and still improving and will continue to mature, which will have a direct impact on the requirements of a tokenisation solution. So how do we deal with these unforeseen requirements? Future-proofing. Well, these are good buzzwords, aren't they? But what does it really mean? Well, if I could sum it up in one sentence, it would be, if we can't see or plan for the requirements specifically, then we need the flexibility to cope with the unforeseen. So how do we define flexibility? Because of course, everyone has a flexible solution. I would break it down into 3 key points. We need to ensure the solution is configured and not coded to meet your requirements. Rather, the solution should have a kit bag of configurations that can be deployed to cope with the requirements as they emerge. As an example, we previously discussed the acquisition of a new business. If the new business requires a different token format to the one currently in use, is this going to require the development of a whole new point solution, or can a new format simply be configured and deployed? To really understand how this could unfold in a real-life situation, let's look at these tender requirements we have seen from 2 separate organisations in the same industry. Business number 1, the solution ensures tokens and PAN data maintain a one-to-one relationship across multiple systems for referential integrity purposes. However, business number 2 says, a credit card may be stored against 1 or more tokens. Now both businesses have very good reasons for their particular setup, but imagine the challenges this could present if business number 1 acquired business number 2. To understand the possible impact, let's take a look at the difference between coding and configuration. Coding is creating a function from scratch and requires project management, software development, security review, testing and more testing, release management, increased cost, time and risk. Whereas configuration is making available something that has previously been coded and effectively requires switching on. So you can see the benefits of ensuring your solution not only addresses your current requirements, but also has available a wide array of additional configurations. The separation of the branding layer from the underlying workflows or business logic is often overlooked, yet it's one of the most effective methods of ensuring a future-proofed solution. To understand why, we just need to look at the pace of change in the marketing department versus the pace of change in the finance department. It's like an F1 car versus a snail. So what am I really saying here? It has become very normal business practice to change, tweak and experiment with the way web pages look and feel. We have many not-for-profit clients that adjust and measure their donation web pages on a weekly basis in order to obtain the nirvana rate of conversions. On the flip side, how often do finance change the process of accepting payments from customers? Changes can be years apart. So from a PCI tokenization angle, it makes very good sense to separate these two layers so simple marketing or branding changes are able to be performed outside the scope of PCI compliance. A solution architected from modular building blocks provides the freedom to add or remove modules as requirements emerge without the need to re-engineer the current solution. At a high level, the tokenization system is typically broken down into a number of discrete functions. These functions, depending on the business, could include an admin system to manage card and token data, bulk credit card conversion for the initial once-off tokenization process, ongoing batch processing of tokens, and real-time processing channels. We have seen one such example where an organisation had been live with their tokenization solution for 12 months and they introduced the option for customers to pay for their insurance premiums on a monthly basis. This was handled with the addition of the batch processing module, enabling the client to generate a batch file of tokens and amounts from their ERP system on a monthly basis for uploading and processing. The effort and risks to implement this was minimised because of the modular approach, which allowed a focus on testing the batch process only and not retesting the entire solution. The benefits of implementing a truly flexible tokenization solution that can cope with unforeseen requirements will provide your project with budget certainty, implementation certainty, reduced risks, and ease of ongoing compliance. So armed with all this knowledge and to ensure we don't build one bike only to find we need to throw it away a short time later, what type of questions can we ask about the tokenization solution that we're looking to implement? The key is to break the questions into two sections: questions that address your current specific issues and questions that determine the flexibility of the solution. All too often in the tenders we have seen, the focus is very much on the current specific issues. So these are real examples of questions that address current specific issues. Contractors' hosted payment form must display on-screen resolutions from 800 by 600 upwards. The solution must integrate to the SAP GUI client version 5.0 such that an operator can perform ad hoc payment or credit card registration. The solution provides a token generation format with format preserving capabilities. So whilst these questions are relevant right now, if, for example, there is a change in the ERP system, will the tokenization system still be compatible? Some good questions that can help determine the flexibility of a tokenization solution would include: is the solution contractually obliged to remain compliant with evolving standards? Can the solution be commonly used across different software and technologies? Can multiple token formats be used across one deployment? Is it possible to have more than one batch file format of tokens? Is it possible to have a client-specific enhancement, or is it a product-only approach? And is the branding layer separated from the business or processing logic? So in summary, without the luxury of hindsight, first-time projects will always be challenging, but there are some key things you can do that will minimise project risks. Good upfront planning can avoid scope creep, underestimating the size of the cardholder footprint, and issues that arise from the nuances of current payment processes. A flexible platform or solution will ensure it is possible to cope with unforeseen, future business requirements, the acquisition or merger of new businesses, and the evolving PCI standards. We hope you found that interesting, and if you'd like to learn more about tokenization, please visit www.ippayments.com.